For the former president, it's a tale of two cities. Here in Washington, the Supreme Court heard arguments on his claim of a president's total immunity from prosecution for actions taken while in office. Up in New York, Trump returned to court for more testimony in his criminal hush money trial. CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa joins us now from Lower Manhattan. Bob, you've been in the courthouse today. How badly did the former president want to be in Washington instead today?
It was evident, Ed, this morning when former President Trump showed up at a construction site that he would much rather be on the campaign trail. But of course, he is here in Lower Manhattan, sitting inside the courthouse behind me all day, listening to testimony by his longtime associate, David Pecker, the former National Enquirer publisher. And he's mandated to sit there. This is a criminal trial. This is an issue that the Trump campaign is dealing with across the board when it comes to scheduling the presumptive Republican nominee's campaign. He can only really have rallies on the weekend and on Wednesdays.
And amid all this, you're outside one of essentially four cases involving him or his associates today, all of which have had developments. In Arizona, for example, the Democratic Attorney General has indicted 18 people in its 2020 election interference case, including now former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and the former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani. What does that mean for Trump himself and more broadly for his campaign?
For former President Trump, this is a cascading series of challenges he continues to face each and every day. It's Arizona late last night with some of his Republican allies and former assistants and former advisors in the White House being charged for trying to come up with a fake elector scheme. It's the Supreme Court now dealing with presidential immunity, everything that's happening here in New York. This is a field of challenges for Trump to go across, a thicket of things he has to deal with. But at the same time, he's competitive in the polls. And so for the Democrats, as they look at all this, you don't see President Biden, who you cover so closely, focusing on this in any real way politically. But it's this blizzard of challenges that they're just saying it represents a chaotic candidate who would again be a chaotic president in the Democrats' view. And perhaps there's a view among some Democratic strategists that ultimately all of this will be a burden on Trump's shoulders, and it could affect how voters perceive Trump, whether they want to have another 4 years with someone with this kind of personality, this kind of legal peril on his own horizon. But there's no guarantee for Democrats that all of these legal challenges will ultimately make Trump pay a political price.
No, there's not. That's a good point. We should point out the president was in upstate New York today for yet another announcement tied to the various pieces of legislation passed in recent years, part of his legacy that he's trying to campaign on. Real quick, in yet another Trump case, this one involving the author E. Jean Carroll, a federal judge denied Trump's request for a new trial in her civil defamation suit. Can he appeal that decision?
Trump says he is going to continue to fight on all fronts, whether it's civil, criminal, state, local, federal. This is a combative legal strategy across the board. You can't really be a Trump lawyer and not have a combative posture when it comes to the appellate process. And so we're seeing that from all my sources close to Trump, that he is going to keep pushing for this trial to be dismissed, for different damages that have been awarded to people who have sued him to be either dismissed or shrunk in some way. And so this is going to be the story of the rest of the year. Trump in court, the courtroom as the campaign trail, Trump dealing with the legal challenges, which have some interest to voters, but really aren't kitchen table issues. But all of it becomes this stew that affects our entire political climate.
Yeah, and real quick, those sources you talked to, how do they describe his mood right now?
His mood is pretty passive inside the courtroom because the judge has a gag order. He can't be grumbling. He can't be making comments. And the prosecution is keeping a close eye on Trump every second. Anything he does could put him in jeopardy when it comes to financial penalties, maybe even a more severe penalty from this judge. So he's pretty quiet in the courtroom. Outside of the courtroom, not so much.
Robert Costa there in Lower Manhattan tracking the Trump hush money criminal trial. Thank you, sir. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
All right, let's keep this up now and talk to Shelby Talcott and Finn Gómez. They join me now. Shelby, politics reporter for Semaphore, which is a publication the color of Finn Gómez's tie. He is CBS News political director. If you've ever been to the Semaphore website, you know what I'm talking about.
I love his tie.
Good to see both of you. Big week, big day in a big week, and a week that sort of is reflective of where campaign 2024 is going. We'll get to that in a second. Let's talk first about this Arizona election interference case. It's sprung up again. We got Rudy Giuliani, Boris Epstein, John Eastman, Mark Meadows, names we've heard in the past, suddenly back in the news because it appears they're not named in the indictment, right? But they appear to have been charged. What does this do for Trump, not only maybe in the Grand Canyon state, but overall? Does this even matter at this point?
Well, that's a good question. And I think ultimately the important thing is that this is the fourth state to bring charges like this. And so it just underscores how big this alleged scheme was, which of course relates back to some of Donald Trump's own legal issues, even if he is not indicted in this specific Arizona case. Also, I think it's notable that a few of these people who were indicted, right, Rudy Giuliani, Boris Epstein, Christina Bobb, they're still in Donald Trump's orbit, right?
Yeah.
Christina Bobb was
Actively.
just named as the senior counsel to the RNC's election integrity unit.
Right.
And so what does that mean for her role? What does that mean for the RNC's role? Boris Epstein is one of Donald Trump's sort of top legal aides. What does that mean for what he can do with all of these other ongoing cases? So I do think it affects Donald
And
Trump's...
he was there today.
Exactly.
He was there at his table today.
I do think it affects Donald Trump's other cases. And it also just underscores, as you said, what this entire election is becoming, which is just a slew, an onslaught of various legal problems.
For him, and then for the president, he's out doing the job of being president, right? We were talking about this earlier today here in the office.
Like I spoke to both sides today, you know, and from sources within the Biden campaign, they say that of course they're loving this split screen between Donald Trump at the courthouse and Joe Biden at the White House, right? They're seeing that, and not just there, like Joe Biden's talking about issues. They're saying the issues that matter in this cycle, abortion rights in Tampa, in Donald Trump's home state now, right? He's being pugilistic on the campaign trail. They're talking about big foreign aid, of course, that was signed. That was a big win for him, they say, and of course being like surrounded by his union endorsers yesterday
here
as well, here in D.C. They love this split screen. Of course, I did speak to a Trump campaign source who also says that for them, this is the gift that keeps on giving. They're talking about what's happening in Arizona. They're talking about what's happening with SCOTUS. They feel that really good that this is actually going to get kicked back to the appeals level or back to Chutkin, and it's not going to happen before November 5th. They feel really strongly about that, and politically, they feel really good about what they believe is an overreach in Arizona as well.
And Joe Biden's campaign is notably not really directly attacking Donald Trump over these legal issues. And that is, I think, in part because they don't want to add to Donald Trump's argument that this is politically motivated, but also because there is this natural split screen. So they feel they don't have to. They can focus on the issues that American voters are concerned about and let Donald Trump do his thing.
I think we failed to see here in Washington the resonance of the decision this week to change overtime pay rules, the end of non-compete clauses, those kinds of things that conceivably put money in the pocket of working class Americans. We're going to hear about that and realize current government did that. The Biden government did that while Trump's in courtrooms. I mean, they may not draw the immediate distinction, but it's those kinds of things that they hear about happening that they go, oh, that's kind of a big deal. And
I think the question is, does that end up being front of mind for American voters over things that the Donald Trump's campaign is arguing, which is the economy, the cost of gas, kitchen table issues. And so it's really interesting, and it's sort of setting up this debate over that.
We have a minute to go, both of you. What is the latest on him picking a running mate, Trump? And why isn't that person potentially picked and already out on the road campaigning while he's stuck in a courtroom? Seems like a lost opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to several sources in the Trump world and on the Trump campaign just over the last couple of days who say that it's a jump ball. Like it's, you know,
who are the names? The
names I'm hearing, though, are Tim Scott, of course, a South Carolina senator, former competitor. I'm hearing Marco Rubio. I was, quote, told it's real. And also that there might be some others, including
Doug Burgum.
Doug Burgum, yes, Doug Burgum, the North Dakota senator, governor, who also ran for president as well. But
And Sarah
for very
Huckabee
sweet.
Sanders, right?
Yes, Sarah Huckabee Sanders is on the list, but it's a long
Lower
list.
list. It is a long list. And the last thing I'll say on that is, at the end of the day, though, Donald Trump's team is not convinced that they need to pick a vice presidential candidate that would help him. They don't know that that will matter. And so that might not be as big of a factor as we think.
All right.
It's been a long time until we hear that news.
Shelby and Finn, thank you for being here. We appreciate it.